gosh, Dr. Carson, I don't think they really like you out here. I mean, isn't he the best? And you know what I always loved about Dr. Carson, and I had a great opportunity to work with him while I was at the White House with President Trump, is that he has a heart of gold and always did the right thing for the American people.
And I always refer to her as No Mercy.
No mercy, that's right. No mercy against those liberals, right? Well, let's get started. This is, I think, a very important topic because we know Black lives really matter. But yet, the Black Lives Matter, Inc., they've distorted this message. So talk to us about how Black Lives Matter, Inc. has been so destructive in really distorting this message for the Black people.
Yes, interestingly enough, a couple of weeks before the 4th of July this year, I said, on that extended weekend, there are going to be dozens of people shot in Chicago and many fatalities, and it'll barely get any mention unless there's a white police officer who shoots an unarmed Black person. And that would be the only case in which, to them, it mattered. They really don't care otherwise. And why is it that the lives of Black babies don't seem to matter, you know? Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, made sure that those clinics were primarily in the communities of minorities. And she believed that it was prudent to get rid of certain individuals. She believed in eugenics. She was a hero in Nazi Germany, and she was the hero of Hillary Clinton. Isn't that interesting? And yet, if that was a conservative or a Republican, and Margaret Sanger was their hero, then there would be a major outcry on the base of the news media. So why is it that there's such selective outrage in our society depending on who says something and who does something? You know, I remember at HUD, in the first speech I gave, I said there were many immigrants who came here, including some maybe who didn't come voluntarily in the bottom of slave ships. And they said, how could you possibly refer to slaves as immigrants? And then they found multiple episodes where Barack Obama referred to them as immigrants also. Oh, then it's okay. Such hypocrisy. And I think that's one of the reasons that the news media these days rates just a little bit below used car salesmen in terms of credibility.
But you bring up the news media, and I would say the left that are implementing these Marxist ideology in terms of the destruction of the nuclear family, where it's really the government that's in charge of your life. How has this impacted the Black community?
Well, when you look at what the Black community has been through, go all the way back to slavery. It was the family, the strong family units, and the faith in God that got people through that. That got people through Jim Crow, through severe segregation, through all the difficulties. But what really had a negative impact was when the government came along and said, there, you poor little thing. I'm going to take care of all your needs. And started implementing policies that were destructive to family formation. Those are the things that have hurt the Black community the most. And now you have those same people, you know, they claim that the parties switched and that the Republicans became the Democrat because they don't want to admit what they did, but they're the same people. And the same people are now saying, let's defund the police. Well, when I was a kid growing up, I spent a lot of time the projects, and in places where there was a lot of violence, the police were a very important part of keeping order. And if, in fact, you get rid of the police, who are the people who are going to be hurt the most? And you look in the cities that are run by radical left-wingers, what is going on in those cities? Drug addiction and murders, crime, poor education. You look at some of those cities, you have very few, maybe just a handful of people who graduate from high school who have any real proficiency in math and in the critical areas where they need to succeed. And then we have all of this talk about race. Everything comes back to race. How crazy is that? And I cannot buy into it because, first of all, I have tremendous faith in God. And what did he say? When you look in 1 Samuel 16:7, it says, "For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart." And you know, think about that. Isn't that the same thing that Dr. Martin Luther King was talking about when he said people should be judged on the basis of their character and not on the color of their skin? Why would you judge somebody on the basis of something that they cannot control? Wouldn't it make more sense to talk about something that they do have control over, their character? Isn't that what we should be talking about in America?
You mentioned about the poor quality of education in so many of these inner cities. Obviously, and I think with the pandemic, we saw that the groups that were mostly impacted by the lockdowns and not allowing for in-school learning were low-income American children, as well as the minority communities. But then we're seeing this critical race theory being pushed on them while where we're failing in math and reading, the basics of what we need to learn. Why is critical race theory such a problem in our schools? And are you in any way surprised that parents are finally waking up and trying to stop this indoctrination?
Well, you think about children who are very impressionable. First of all, it was Vladimir Lenin who said, "Give me your children for 4 years, and the seeds that I plant will never be uprooted." They knew what they were talking about and what they were trying to do. And the Bible, in a way, says the same thing, because Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." They're using that in a very negative way to implant what they want to implant in our children. The 1619 Project, all of these talking about how slavery is the center of everything that happened in this country, and for that reason, the United States is an evil place. Well, think about this. If you know your history, you know that slavery has been in existence since there have been human societies. And there's actually more slavery in the world today than there was in 1863 when the Emancipation Proclamation was proclaimed. Why aren't we concerned about the slavery that is going on today? And why aren't we concerned about the increase in human trafficking that has occurred just in the last several months? And it's so hard for those children. We should be thinking about that and dealing with that. Let's think about our future and not spend every moment thinking about the past. And back to the slavery issue for just one moment. Even though it's been prevalent throughout the world, the United States is the country that fought a civil war to get rid of it. And that's what we should be talking about.
Dr. Carson, you must have been talking to Glenn Beck, who gave us an incredible history lesson yesterday, right? And he mentioned many of those facts. In fact, he even reminded us that the KKK was actually a political arm of the Democrat Party, and they want to call conservatives and Republicans the white supremacists.
Right. Well, they've called me a white supremacist, you know. You know, one of the things that you'll notice is whatever the far left accuses you of is exactly what they are doing. They are the experts on it, so they know it, and they recognize what's going on. It would be comical if it weren't so serious in terms of what's happening to us as a nation. We, the American people, are not each other's enemies. And the people who are our enemies are the ones who try to make us think you're enemies. Because that person who lives across the street from you for the last 20 years has a different yard sign, they're your enemy. That is total crap, and we should not buy it. We should not buy into it. And you know, particularly when we look at, you know, the things that have happened in the black community, we have made such incredible progress, and the left will not admit it. But when I was a kid, I remember distinctly when a black person came on television in a non-servile role, everybody was so excited. Hey, come in here, come in here. Everybody could come and watch. That was during my lifetime. Now, we have black generals and admirals and CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and presidents of universities, even Ivy Leagues, a black president, a black vice president. Give me a break. Does it mean that we have achieved everything we need to achieve? No. But it means we've made tremendous progress, and we as Americans should be proud of the progress we've made, and we should continue to make that progress. And I think conservatives have done a much better job than liberals, who sit around and try to decide what you're supposed to think and who you're supposed to be if you're black. You don't have any rights to your own opinion. You have to think what they think. That is racism. That is systemic racism.
But Dr. Carson, we've had tremendous progress with the black community, but I really believe black conservatives have paid a price. I always find that even within the community and just liberals, they will pounce on black conservatives.
Yes.
So what's your message to black conservatives on pushing back and saying why what they stand for is truly American and it's for the right direction of our country?
Well, you know, this is nothing new. There have always been people who wanted to keep the black community divided. You know, in the time of slavery, they would tell the slaves that worked in the house, you're better than the ones in the yard. The ones in the yard, you're better than the ones in the field. Keep them fighting amongst themselves because you didn't want them to coalesce. And then after slavery, the ones who were light-skinned, you're better than the ones who are dark-skinned. Today, the conservatives are your enemies, or the liberals are your enemies. Keep them fighting each other, because if people unite and look at what the real problems are, the real things that cause poverty and dysfunction, you know, like breaking up of the family, not having fathers in the home, not having traditional complete families, which is what God intended for people. And, you know, if we would do that, that would make a big difference. And recognize this, you know, if we were a systemically racist country, which is a narrative the left is trying to push, why would people be forming caravans trying to get in here? So that they could be persecuted? I don't think so. And in terms of per capita income, one of the groups with the highest per capita income, if not the highest in the United States, Nigerians. It so happens that most of them are black. And, but if you know any Nigerian families, you know that for them, the baseline is a bachelor's degree. Education. Education is the thing that makes people successful in our country. Why is it that so many on the left oppose choice in education? Why do they keep people depressed and ignorant and not functioning at a high level? Why is that?
So recently we saw the Black Lives Matter Utah chapter say that the American flag is a symbol of hatred. What does the American flag mean to you?
Well, all you have to do is think about the Star Spangled Banner. And there was Francis Scott Key on that British frigate. And they had said to General Armistead at Fort McHenry, take down that American flag or we will destroy you. And he didn't take that flag down, and they bombarded him all night long. And when Francis Scott Key got up at dawn and he looked, and believe it or not, that flag was still there with all the bombs bursting in air. And there were Americans on the ground dead who worked all night to make sure that that flag stayed up. That flag means freedom. It means freedom for every single one of us. And I will always stand and salute the American flag.
So I want to get your final thoughts on what we can do better to make sure that we are taking our message of freedom and hope and opportunity and unity to the Black community.
Well, that is so vitally important. What we have to recognize is that we have to be courageous. Each one of us has a sphere of influence. We need to be willing to stand up for the things that we believe in. You cannot be the land of the free if you're not the home of the brave. And that means every single one of us has to stand up. This is why we created the American Cornerstone Institute. Please, if you have an iPhone, go to our website, americancornerstone.org. Sign up, follow us on Twitter, on Facebook. Get involved. That's what it's all about. Our Little Patriots program, teaching the young people at the earliest stages the true history, the unvarnished history, warts and all, so that they will actually be extremely proud of this nation in which we live. God gave us this nation. We are one nation under God.
Let's give a round of applause to Ben Carson.